Welcome to the Blind Centered Audio Description Chats. These are the edited recordings of the Blind Centered Audio Description live chats.
The live is the most fun part. We get together, we start with a question, and then we invite up anybody from the audience who wants to come and chat with us, agree, disagree, shed light on something that we hadn't thought about before, which is Nefertiti's favorite.
I'm Nefertiti Matos Olivares, and I'm a bilingual professional voiceover artist who specializes in audio description narration. I'm also a fervent cultural access advocate and a community organizer.
I'm Cheryl Green, an access artist, audio describer, and captioner.
And I'm Thomas Reed, host and producer, Read My Mind Radio, voice artist, audio description narrator, consultant, and advocate.
Hi, I'm Scott Blanks. I'm a passionate advocate for the highest quality audio description in all of the arts. I'm the co-founder of the LinkedIn Audio Description Group and the Twitter AD community.
Scott Nixon here. I'm an audio description consumer and advocate, hoping to be an audio description narrator very, very soon.
Hey, Nev, why don't you tell people how they could join the live recording?
That's really simple. Just follow us on social media to keep up with important details such as dates, times, and what platform we'll be using. On Twitter, I'm at NefMattOli. Cheryl?
I'm at Who Am I to Stop It?
I'm at TS Reed, R to the EID.
How about you, Scott?
I'm at Blind Confucius. That's BLINDCONFUCIUS.
And you can catch me on my social media, Twitter only. That's Mr. Broken Eyes, capital M-R, capital B-R-O-K-E-N, capital E-Y-E-S.
Recording now.
Greetings. Before we jump into this edited version of our live blind-centered audio description chat from April 5th, 2023, we wanted to let you know that we're editing this discussion into 2 episodes. The next episode will feature a blind film critic who reviews films both with and without AD in order to highlight the need for audio description. Here's Cheryl kicking off our discussion.
We were inspired to talk about what does it mean to critique or even analyze or assess or publicly or privately give your opinion about a film and about the audio description, because there seem to be some feelings of barriers about who's allowed to share their opinion, especially if they say, I didn't like something. Who's gatekeeping that? And who's doing the gaslighting when someone does present their opinion and someone else says, no, that's clearly wrong. So those were some of the things that came up. And I know, Thomas, you wanted to talk about some of the ways that you do critique or comment on films.
Yeah, and so even before that, I kind of wanted to go back and because something I've been thinking about is based on this conversation that we have several times, not necessarily here, but folks, we have these conversations in many different formats, and so it's like, we often want to hear from other people, right? Other blind folks, other folks with low vision, other AD users specifically now. And sometimes we don't really hear back. And I started thinking about that. Like, why is that? Why aren't we hearing back from the community as much as we may like to? That could be for the purposes of advocacy. And by advocacy, I'm talking about all aspects of that, reaching out to AD producers, reaching out to the streaming companies, broadcasters, even back when we were trying to get the CVAA passed, reaching out to your representatives, all of that stuff. And we always want to hear from people. And so, but specifically now thinking about the process of talking about AD from the user experience, why don't we hear back from them? And I think there's a lot of things that we have to remember. Number one, AD, even today in 2023, is relatively new. Within the last maybe 5 years, maybe even a little bit more than that, maybe less than that. But 5 years, I think, is probably the most amount of consumption of AD that we've had in probably in our history. So whether that be 5 years, 10 years, it's probably definitely within that last year since the CVAA has been passed. And so in that sense, watching films with audio description is a new experience. And I know me personally, when I started watching films with audio description, I was excited about every single film that came out because I had access. So it wasn't so much that I was watching this movie to critique the audio description. At that point, to be honest with you, there were many films that I was watching that I wasn't even critiquing the film. I was just freaking happy to be able to watch this film and enjoy it. And I think that is probably the same for a lot of people. Anytime someone would ask me about a film, I would always say, hey, look, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to rate this film high already because I had access. Like I was already given one thumb up. You know what I'm saying? I was already given one thumb up just because it had audio description. And I feel like there's probably a lot of people like that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I really don't. I think it's going to take some time for the community to become more critical about audio description. And I think it's going to take more time for the community to become more critical about all aspects of that, right? So the writing, we always talk about the writing, and some we know some of it is better than others. But then also the film itself, right? Being more critical about what you're watching it, because we have to do both. We're watching the film, and audio description is that filter, so we're processing all of that at one time, and that in itself, can be a lot of work. And not everybody comes to audio description to do that work. Most people want to watch television and films and whatnot as their form of entertainment, just to chill. And so, we might be expecting more from the casual AD user than we should, right? Because most of us who talk about AD, who are really caring about, most of us who show up here, who advocate for it, we're not the regular AD user. And so I just want to, me personally, be mindful of that, because I don't want to see a situation where we're sort of blaming and putting all this extra stuff on the community. Like, oh, you got to get out there and you have to, and it's true, we do need to do that. But when we talk about, you got to get out there and you got to voice your opinion on the audio description, well, that's public speaking, whether it be in writing, whether it be on a forum like this, that's public speaking. And we already know that's something that's scary to a lot of people. And then when you add on to that, it's being critical. And we know this is a subjective thing, whether it be the audio description, whether it be the film. These are people's opinions. And you know how we get. Just think of, if you're one of those people who argue about sports and stuff like that, it's just, any time that it differs, you can get into an argument. Someone could come and say, I really enjoyed this audio description. I like the narrator. I thought it was great. They did a great job. And then you get someone coming out and telling them, well, I don't know what you're listening to. That sucked. And let me tell you why it sucked. Damn, that's kind of, who wants to give their opinion after that? Who wants to get into that fight? So these are things we have to think about. And eventually I think we're going to see a lot more of us being critical about AD and about films. But I think it's going to take some time. So I want to throw that out there for some food for thought. I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it's a steak. Maybe it's a little chicken McNugget. I don't know what kind of food that is. Maybe it's just a snack. I don't know, whatever. But if anybody wants to talk about that, Cheryl, Nefertiti, if y'all still there, maybe I lost connection and I'm talking to myself.
Oh no, we're here. We're here.
So,
I
what
guess
do you
I'll
think?
chomp down on the snack a little bit
Yeah,
and
chomp.
simply say you're absolutely right that there is more than a handful, I think, of us, but definitely a certain number of us who are very vocal and who do stick our necks out there. I'm one of these people who critiqued something recently, rightly so. These were verifiable mistakes and things that were happening, and I was accused of not uplifting other talent and all this stuff, and that not was not at all my intention. But when you play favorites, right, and you have your favorites, we all do, I certainly do, and somebody points out a flaw or something like that, there are some people who might take offense to that and let their opinion out there. um so what do they say? Opinions are like so everybody's got one. So I don't know that, somebody, the person, I mean, accusing me of not uplifting other talent, that's just, that was incorrect. And I don't think anybody else saw what I said like that, but that person did. So does that mean that that person is incorrect? Yeah, I and others think so, but it's still their opinion. So Thomas, when you say, that somebody was like, oh, I think this is great, and somebody came back like, I don't know what you were listening to, it sucked. I think both opinions are valid,
Hmm.
but just it doesn't have to get personal. It doesn't, if the person had just said, "Oh, that's interesting because I listened to the same thing and I thought it was terrible for this and that reason," then that would have been perfectly fine. I
Yeah.
think it gets murky and nasty when you make it personal. Like, I don't know what you were listening to. Like, there's no need for that. So maybe a little decorum, a little bit of manners could go a long way. But I think everybody's opinion is is valid, and
Absolutely.
I think it's super important that for those of us who are advocating and who are not afraid to say possibly controversial stuff, one, we have to have thick skin, right? And two, uh, not everybody's going to always agree with us. Feelings might get hurt, for sensitive types out there. You have to expect with anything that when you put yourself out there might be a little blowback from people who don't necessarily agree with you. And that's okay. I think a lot of good discourse can come from that. Different perspectives can come from that. I always say that I love to hear from people who don't agree with us
Hmm.
because it
Hmm.
might teach us something, it might give us something to think about.
Yeah. That's
Um,
your favorite.
it is. That is my favorite thing. I agree with you. Some people just want to watch a film and lose their mind in that film and then forget about it. Not everybody's an advocate, not everybody is outspoken, but I do think that we do need more people to be comfortable with being critical.
Yeah.
Not just this, I'm grateful that it exists at all. So let me not say anything bad about it because what if they take it away? No, I strongly disagree with that.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think audio description is here. It's not going anywhere. It's here. And I think the more en masse we present, the more unified we present as a community, the more seriously we'll be taken and the further we will move the needle. I'm not afraid of it going away or like having repercussions that because we speak up so much, you know,
Yeah.
it's going to be I don't believe that's true. I don't believe that will happen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. For my own and for a lot of other people, I'm sure, when I say I was just happy to have access, I was not coming from the perspective of, okay, I'm going to give this thumbs up or whatever because I'm scared it's going to get taken away. No, not at all. It's just about, you have to remember um, that for grown folks, and even some of the younger folks, like these last few years are almost like this sort of renaissance in terms of what they
Yes.
have access to in terms
Yes.
of film, and to expect folks to be able to just be really critical, we might be expecting too much. And I think what you said about the venue in terms of where they voice it. If you're doing that in social media, if you're doing that in a closed, which I've noticed too, is that in a closed sort of forum like a Facebook audio descriptions list or something like that, right? Or an email list. There's probably going to be more of that taking place because it's a somewhat controlled environment. There are rules around there, right? We invite people to come here, and when they step in here, we're not going to take any nonsense. We're going to keep everybody. Hey, no, we want to hear from you if you have a difference of opinion, and we're going to respect that. So this is a controlled environment. But if you're thinking about, because I often wonder, like, I don't see as much on an open forum like Twitter, where I think it is important to have it because that's when other folks are going to see it.
Yes.
But I'm realizing that might not be a safe space for people. People don't feel that that's a safe space. And I got to understand that, remember that, yeah, that is true. That might be true for people. So, but I still think it's important, yeah, for folks like you, whomever else, what say what you gotta say. But yes, be respectful. But you can't control it. And like you said, if you put it out there, just expect that something's gonna come back. Something's gonna come back. There's all the other isms that come into play where people think they can just say something to somebody and they wouldn't say that to someone else. And so unfortunately you might get more. You might get more than I would get because I think people might check themselves.
Oh yeah, as a
And
brown blind
that's a good
woman.
thing to do. That's a good thing to do. By the way, check yourself if you're gonna come to me. I'm just letting you know. I'm just letting you know.
Check yourself before you wreck yourself. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. Like as an outspoken brown blind woman, like yeah, some people attack just because,
Yeah.
just because. So I've come to expect it. And I'm thick-skinned. Some things do get under my skin, but guess what? You'll never see it. I won't show it to you. I might talk to Thomas. I might talk to Cheryl. I might talk to my partner. I might scream into my pillow. But that's not like the kind of thing that you give these sorts of people the ammunition to keep on, attacking you. If you're sure of what you're saying and you stand behind it, I think that's very brave of people to do.
Absolutely.
And I think it's really important that we just don't accept the status quo. If there's a show that you really like that clearly did not go through QC, what's wrong with saying, hey, this is not okay? This is why blind QC is so important. Any QC, for that matter, for some of the quality that's being put out there these days. Any QC would be an improvement over this. Some people would take a lot of offense to that. And I think it's important that we let these things be known, that it's being noticed, that there is a community out here watching this content and paying attention. And if you're not doing something right, you're not doing, putting in the care that it deserves, then if you get shamed, I think that's okay. Maybe it'll motivate them to do better next time.
Absolutely.
We deserve that. At the very least, we deserve to have care in the access that we, literally pay for, right? A lot of these streaming services are paying for this stuff just to get a crappy. I'm sorry, I get so speechless with this stuff because it's so infuriating to me.
What's your experience with film before AD? Did you watch audio description? Did you get personal audio description at home? What was your? I never asked you that. If you want to share here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because these days when I watch something that I'm really into, in fact, let me give you a real world experience, or
Please.
yeah, an example. So my partner and I really like Family Guy, and we've been going through the seasons. There's like 20 some odd seasons. Season 9 is not described anywhere that we could find. And we tried recently to watch an episode from that season. And we had no idea what was going on. There was so much music with very little sound effects, very little dialogue, that we were like, well, if this is the first episode of this 20 odd episode season, we're just going to have to go without, because there's no way that we can follow along. And it got me to thinking, how were we watching stuff before audio description? And so he and I had this whole conversation about, we really don't know how we got on without audio description, before audio description. I think we just made do. I love the show The Golden Girls. Absolutely love that show. I started watching that show when I was 9 years old, and it was only recently that it got some description. I'm realizing, based on the description, that so many of the scenes I thought I knew what was going on, I was completely wrong. My brain filled things in, and I was wrong so much of the time. But how do I know that? Because I now have description. I spent years thinking the wrong things were happening in the show. They made sense in my brain,
Yeah.
but it's not what actually was happening.
How do you know that what you're being described, what's being described, is correct?
Honestly,
Yeah.
you don't. You have to trust and have faith
Uh-huh.
that you're being told, being given accurate information. For example, let's say in a scene, right? I thought one of the characters was, I don't know, stirring some pasta in a pot. Turns out that actually she was, like, I don't know, serving a dish at the table. Right? So not a huge difference. It was still in a kitchen. It was still an action of some kind, but it was different. So from my making up, oh, she must be stirring the pasta in the pot because they're talking about food, to the describer not telling me, she stands at the table and serves from a platter. I have to trust that that's true, because I'm assuming that nobody's going to lie about something visual simply because they're saying it, presumably, to a person who can't see it for themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, the truth is that I don't know.
That's right. You don't know. And you just said that, and I'm so glad you said it, trust and faith, because that's exactly what it is. Now, factor in when we ask folks to give us their opinion, and you're nervous that someone else might tell you the opposite or disagree with you. And then sometimes, it comes down to, well, damn, how do I know? How, even your opinion is based on this audio description, is based on trust and faith. And then when you're arguing with somebody, or even when you're just discussing something, and maybe has this ever happened to you? You might be discussing a film or television show with someone who cited, and then your interpretation of what happened was off.
Yes.
So why in the world would you want to talk about films or anything in public again? So you see the fact that we have to do that, and we're using our trust and faith, right? And we already have all of these other things sort of, again, with the idea that you're somewhat new to film in a way for a lot of people. I don't necessarily consider myself new to film. I was watching before I lost my sight, but I watch differently now.
Right.
And so sometimes I still might be really hesitant. I'll do, before I talk about it, I might confirm things with other people. Hey, is this correct? Is this what you see? Is it, you know what I'm saying? I might do some of that to make sure I have things right. But yeah, that's another part of it. Trust and faith is the way we experience content.
And Thomas, I think there's also a trust issue. I'm going to come from the cited audio describer perspective. I think there's a trust issue too, where there are some audio describers who inherently don't trust the opinion of the blind consumer. And I'm not sure why or where that comes from. It could be, I don't trust anybody unless they've gone to this institution and are credentialed or certified. I don't know what it is, but I have, it's not universal, but I've noticed some people have a bias toward, well, I'm trained, so my opinion of what was good or bad audio description is more valid and better informed and more useful than opinions of the AD consumer. And I think that's a real problem. And I think that on the non-blind side, we need to check that bias, notice that bias, and do something about it, and really say, if the end user is the person whose opinion matters most, then that's who we should always be asking. So, you've talked about some barriers people may face to wanting to give a critique. And I think this is another one that's real important. Not that somebody's going to take your audio description away, but that you'll be discredited or ignored or talked about behind your back about what does Thomas know? He's blind. He doesn't know what a good audio description is. And that is a bias that I think for any sighted people here listening to this or listening to the recording, stop and ask yourself if you might have that, because you won't know until you stop and ask yourself. And it's something that I think really needs to be addressed in the community of people who provide audio description.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. And it, if that person, right? So if a user of AD has a good experience, they walk away from that film, that television show, thinking, wow, I enjoyed that. And then they hear someone telling them, no, that was bad. You shouldn't have enjoyed that. That really is, that's awful. That's all. And it kind of goes against, like, I'm all for better AD, that it meets certain criteria, but I also know that this stuff is subjective, right? And so I'm not talking about the AD that breaks the quote unquote rules, like the AD that's telling you that the phone is ringing when you hear the phone ringing. I'm not necessarily talking about that. But it feels like, the name of what we do here is Blind-Centered Audio Description Chats. And that scenario that you gave, Cheryl, is totally not centering a blind person, right? It's centering the person who's providing the service. I say that on purpose. The person who's providing the service provider. The person with the certification. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I'm one of these people, and here we go with a controversial opinion. Just because you may have a letter or 3 or 10 behind your name doesn't mean that you're necessarily the smartest or the most appropriate person in the room to speak on whatever. I understand that we put so much stock in, certification, and those things are supposed to say, hey, yeah, this is what qualifies me to be here and say these things. Just like at the top of our gatherings here, we say, hey, I'm Nefertiti Matos, I do this, then the third, I'm Thomas Reed, I'm Cheryl Green. And to let you know, hey, we're here, we do this, hopefully we know what we're talking about, and yet we don't have letters behind our names. And I think we're some of the smartest people, most with it people out here. And yes, that is an opinion, and I'm totally biased.
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott, consumer of audio description, and dabble in quality control in the field as well, and have a day job in a nonprofit blindness organization. So interesting, Thomas. You were talking about how things change. I was thinking back to in the early aughts, in the early 2000s. I would look for and sometimes be successful finding scripts online, like a complete movie script. And that was the closest I could get to audio description for some films. And I was thrilled with that experience. And I look back on it now, and all the time that I spent searching those things out and still knowing that my access was not the same, it proves the point that we are beings in motion, and that we're constantly, hopefully, changing to some extent, learning, getting better, and looking for better. There was also recently a discussion, still going on, actually, I would say, in an email forum about audio description, about synthetic speech versus human. And I had to kind of check myself, because one of my initial reactions was frustration with people who just said, I'll be okay with something rather than nothing. Because I think we're all at different points on the journey, right? And there are people who have been, used to a certain thing for so long that change can be challenging. But I also feel that it's really important to continue to advocate. And I think we can advocate and show by example, and people will start to catch on to that. And I think it's also a point that in that same conversation that was happening on an email forum this week, there were a number of people asking, like, what can I do? What can I do to get more involved? And even that, I think, is a huge improvement. I think that the renaissance, like you called it, Thomas, that's a good word, of what's been happening in the last 6 years, 5-6 years, we are seeing a little bit of a wave building of people wanting to get more involved, either professionally or even just to advocate. So we keep setting the example, and I think we're going to see good things coming.
You know what Scott was talking about was really interesting, though. That's amazing. Like you're going and searching for a script of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
What made you do that? What was it about that particular movie that made you just need to know about what's going on?
Honestly, I think I did it with most of the movies I was watching, and I was watching fewer movies. I mean, listen, at the time, 2005 versus now, let's say, to me, in my mind, there are a lot more things to watch now.
Yeah.
I don't think it's arguable that that's the case. So I would do it by default with everything. How did I start? I don't remember. I just remember that, like, I was trying to find any way I could to get to know more about the movie.
Mm-hmm. But was there a specific reason in terms of that movie?
Yeah. No, I did it with a bunch of movies.
You did it with a bunch of movies. Okay.
I don't know. I would say my success rate was like 15 or 20%.
Oh, wow.
Why were there complete scripts online? That's a great question too. I have no idea. That was maybe something that shouldn't have been happening, but it was great because you got the scene setting and the scene transition,
right.
the camera angles and everything. So it was a form of audio description. Mm-hmm. But would I do it now? Probably not.
Yeah. That story, Scott, reminds me of like, you know, what they say about water. You know, water's gonna get through. Like, you're gonna find what it is that you're looking for. You're gonna find a way, which is audio description. I mean, you know, the fact that blind people wanted access, and we find a way, and we're gonna find a way. Like that is the thing, man. Yeah. That's
water will take its shape, find its way.
That's right. I'm gonna have to look up some scripts. Cool. Well, that concludes this week's conversation. Why don't y'all keep the conversation going on social media?
Use hashtag ADFUBU for us by us, hashtag describe everything, and hashtag audio description.
And hey, you know we're out here, right? Mm-hmm. Gathered and galvanized, y'all. If you haven't joined us yet, what are you waiting for? You can find us in the LinkedIn audio description group and the AD Twitter community. We know that your participation will only make these spaces better.